Okay, so today we're going to wrap up the PHP training, at least the major points that I want to touch upon. This is going to be part 3, adding user accounts and for backend management. We're only focusing on the backend management, but obviously you could add user accounts for many things. You could have customers log in, view their account, view shopping records, etc. Um, but for the purposes of what we're going to cover today, you're just going to do how to add user accounts, how to create sort of a login page, um, verify the login is correct, and then uh, allow access to certain websites and certain pages. Key concepts that we're going to cover is setting sessions. So there's in PHP you need to do a sessions underscore start. This allows for sessions, or essentially if you're familiar with web terminology, things like cookies. It allows for the web browser to store cookies, which is essentially going to be the login credentials for this user. We're going to create the login page, we're going to verify the credentials, and then we're going to do a clear session, which is going to essentially act as a logout, or a way of allowing the users to clear the cookies and log out of the page. So let's get into it. So here is the login page. Logging in. Currently we only have one user set up. You can see you can just log in and then view the order records. So these are the orders. This is the exact same order page that we saw from last time. All we added were some links up here so that we could easily traverse through the backend management pages. So we have this view orders page, which is this one. Then we also have the add new product. Remember when we add a product here from the last training, this add a product is a way of creating sort of a nice backend so that the products page can then be updated with new types of coffee roast, or and any type of product you would want to create. So this is essentially what we're going to do, and then at the end users can log out and it takes them back to the login page over here. So looking at the code for this, the login page, the page itself is fairly straightforward. We have a header, this login term over here, and then we have a form. Just a simple form which is built around a table. So it just asks for the username and the password. And then on the input type for password, we use password. That way when we're typing in here, other people wouldn't be able to see exactly what you're typing. Okay, so that's just a feature in HTML. Then once we submit, it goes to the new orders page. So in the new orders, this is where we get to the user login and creating the sessions and everything. So the first thing we need to do is we take the username and the password, we take it from post, like we did on the other information. But we're also going to store this information as part of the session. Now where we start the session actually has to be started at the very top of the page. It has to be start as the first line of the script or of the code. And because at the top here we're actually including the CSS menu. This is what gives us all the styling, the green colors, this sort of whole template essentially. So we actually need to go to the CSS menu and put the session start at the very top. Now one thing to watch out for, which threw me for a bit of a loop, is I initially, before the CSS menu in this section, even though I had the session start at the very top, I had a comment. I had this comment, this PHP include to save from retyping lots of things. I had this comment actually above this PHP include, and that was throwing errors where the session couldn't be started because we essentially, from the web browser's perspective, we had already started the page with this line of text rather than this bit that was included. So remember that if you're putting this session type, the session start, if it's using this PHP include, make sure that PHP include is at the very top of the page. Okay, so once we have that, so the session is started, that means that the browser is essentially waiting or caching the information that we put in. It's recording what gets inputted to it. So it waits to see if anything needs to go into this session. What we do here is this bit of code first checks is set. So we check to see if the session username or this session variable that we're calling username is set. and then it checks to see if this session variable called password is set. If it is set, then we just say, oh, the user and the password is equal to whatever is already in the session. If it is not set, else, then we set it. We set session username is equal to this username that we got from post. Okay. Once we have that, then essentially the PHP variables are verified. They're assigned. Now we need to check it based versus the information in the database. So in the database, we have this users table. The users table currently has one user. It's just Joe, myself. And then what we need to do in the code is first connect to the database. So we do the MySQLi connection. We select all the data from the users database. Then, or the users table, I should say, sorry. We then verify that the query is successful. So this is just a check to make sure there's no errors. Then what we're going to do is we're going to, or at least the way I did it, was I created a counter. So this counters are extremely important in programming for lots of reasons. What we're doing here is we're saying I equals 0. Now we then traverse the information that we get from the database. So while we go sort of row by row, this essentially is we take this user result and then we say fetch the associated from user result. This is the query. This query is created from here, this if statement. Okay, so we're from this query or the result of the query, we're traversing it. So fetch all the associated. And if at any row, if the value user password and the value username is equal, values which we got from the post are equal to what PHP captured from the form, then we add 1 to I. So essentially what we're doing is we go line by line, we check username and password versus the variables that are inside the database. If we get a match, then we add 1 to I. So if I becomes 1, then we can check it here. So if I equals 1, then essentially we display the information in new orders. So we display all this information. And you can see all the code here. This is the same as what we did last time. All we did was add these new links. So we have the link href, new orders PHP, add product PHP, login PHP. We put links for view orders, added product, log out. That's these 3 characters, or these 3 links right here. We also added the class highlight link so that they would appear blue. That's just the way the CSS is set up in my page. Then we say the please review. So we just have a little snippet of information here, and then we query and we display all the new orders, just like we did last time. Okay. Now, if I was not equal to 1, so you got to look at the brackets. So this bracket matches all the way down to this bracket. Okay. So from here to here, this is if we have a successful login. Else, if we don't have a successful login, if I does not equal 1, if we don't find a match, invalid credentials, please retry. And we can show that as well. So say we don't use Joe, we use Bob, who's not a valid user. Invalid credentials, please retry. So that sort of shows the code working as expected. If we get a result, if we get a match, I becomes 1. Otherwise, I remains 0. If I remains 0, or else if I is not equal to 1, then invalid credentials, please relog in. There's a lot of flexibility that you could have with this counter. For example, if you needed to have different login screens for different kinds of users, you could still use one login, and then based on the I variable, you could have different, displays of information, different types of pages, essentially all built within this I. So you could have, say, people who are internal users, maybe we do I+2, or people who are external users, people who are customers. Maybe it's I+1 instead, or the customers are I+2 and internal users are I+1. It doesn't really matter, but it just gives you a way of leveraging the counter to then create sort of different kinds of logic for what you want to display. So that's essentially the way the login works. Now log out, uh, or actually let me show you how the code looks like. This is when we're submitting the code to new orders. So we're catching the information in post because we're submitting to the new orders. On add product, we actually don't need the post catch, because on add product we would assume that if the person's has already logged in, there's nothing from post to catch when we get to the add product page. The reason for that is, go back. The reason for that is the direction or the flow of how this website, or how I set up the website, is the login always goes to new products first. So new products um, has the option of catching a value in post, whereas add new product, that would be step 2 from the user perspective. So add product, if there's a valid user, it would have to be caught in the session. And if we logged out and then tried to go straight to the add product, you'll see again at add product, the logic is similar. So it doesn't check the post because there's nothing for it to check from post on the add product page. The post value went to new orders, not add product. But it still can check to see if the session is set, and if the session is set, then we set the username. If there is nothing in the session, like when we clear it, when we log out, then again, same deal, invalid credentials, please retry. So just wanted to highlight that little difference in the code there. Now let's talk about how to clear the session, or how the logout actually works. So at the login page, at the top, which I didn't just touch upon, is there's this extra bit of PHP, which is session destroy. Session destroy essentially clears the session. It makes all the values that you put in, it just deletes all of them. The session is now no longer valid. The cookies are no longer the same values. So that's essentially how to do the logout. Then we also have this little bit of JavaScript, and honestly, this is something I had to look up online, but it's if you Google it, this seems to be the standard way to do a sort of a transparent or a backend page refresh. And what the page refresh is needed is the PHP session destroy requires a page refresh in order to take effect. So when you first load the page, the session is still kept. Then we say session destroy, so the page needs to be refreshed. And this little bit of JavaScript, Windows on load, it just handles that page refresh in the background, so that when you first load the page, it does a second refresh before the user actually notices. So you get a full new page, which enables session destroy. So that's essentially how the logout works. So with that, a reasonably small amount of code, so long as you make sure that your session start is indeed at the very top of the page, then this sort of adds a login form. It adds the logic for creating user accounts, and from here you can do an infinite number of different kinds of page designs, because you can capture login variables, you can capture users, you can map variables to the user data, and then the rest of it is just formatting the backend tables so that it matches with the kind of flow that you're looking to do, and then displaying the information as required to the users. So I hope this is a good starting ground, a good way of sort of letting you get started to creating more advanced web design. And I hope in the past 3 tutorials they were helpful for getting started with understanding PHP, HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript, even though we didn't cover it in great depth. But I hope it was helpful, and as always, thank you very much.